Okay, welcome to the tier guide. I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to properly apply his damage, relics, general builds, the strengths and weaknesses of the character, and just, you know, how to play him. Importantly, we should talk about strengths and weaknesses. Number one, his biggest strengths, he dominates laning phase against most characters. Even characters with cripples, he does very, very well against because he's very hard to shut down thanks to his insane healing. He also counters some of the most destructive gods in the lane, characters like Sobek, characters like Bellona. He can handle them. His weaknesses, however, due to the fact that he doesn't really have a lot of applicable endgame CC or damage, is that his endgame is nowhere near as strong as most other warriors, unless you're so far ahead that it's like, you know, complete domination. But his sustainability allows him to consistently reiterate his damage onto players. I think the first and most important thing that we should talk about is the fact that Fearless cancels into Power Cleave. I'm going to use blue stance just to be a little bit more clear about this. What I'm saying is that when you activate Fearless at any point, and I'm going to just build some cooldown reduction to ensure that we can just do this quickly. When you activate Fearless at any point, you can activate Power Cleave and you can interrupt. You should also note that you can turn your camera during Fearless, and that's the direction in which you will Power Cleave. So as I go through somebody, I want to make sure that I'm either stopping immediately or Power Cleaving while turning my camera. So it'll look a little more something like this. Like that. You notice I didn't get right to the end of the Power Cleave. If you're really fast, you could do it close even through an auto attack cancel, which I'll demonstrate quickly. 3 hits rapidly. This also works with Red Fearless and, you know, Red Power Cleave. I think this is important because you can interrupt this, and sometimes you want to just to get away from somebody because Red Fearless doesn't push them as far as actually getting the Power Cleave off. But most of the time, not only do you not want to cancel Red Fearless, you want to delay the Power Cleave till right before they hit the ground. So that'll kind of bounce them back up and extend their CC. Most people do things like this, which kind of puts them very high, but doesn't really give you an opportunity or your team an opportunity to get extra attacks off. In this sense, we're going to delay it a little bit, which you can see, even a slight delay allowed him to bounce a bit. We're going to show you, I hope I don't mess this up because the timing's pretty tight, it's been a while, but I'm going to show you a long delay here. He goes a little bit farther. Even then, I was probably another half second away from making that flawless. Generally, you want to be starting your combos with Red Power Cleave, or rather Red Fearless, so you can even turn around, knocking the other way, Fearless, Power Cleave. Consistent cancels are going to apply damage very, very quickly and allow you to gain control of the lane. But be wary as your mana is fairly limited, and without some type of mana regen, it will make things very hard for you if you consistently use all 4 abilities on waves without applying massive damage to your opponent. And even if you do, they could wind up pushing you out. So things like Stone of Gaia, for instance, are very powerful because the constant mana regen. Gladiator Shield is great because you're getting mana and health regen, and you can apply it through 4 abilities rapid fire. Leveling order, that depends. Most of the time, you're going to be leveling Power Cleave. In fact, 99% of the time, you're going to be going for Power Cleave, getting that max as soon as possible, and then going into Fearless. But at level 1, there's a little bit of an argument. You're going to be able to do a little bit more damage by getting Fearless because it's going to be doing 80 plus 40 versus 80 plus 80, but you're also stopping the creeps from being able to attack at the same time, which limits the DPS of the enemy wave. This ensures that your overall wave clear is a tad bit stronger, but Power Cleave also will heal you, making your boxing potential stronger. It's just a little bit harder to apply this damage. Personally, I usually go Power Cleave unless I know I have to interrupt my enemy, you know, the solo laner. And for the most part, I would only really play him in solo. Some people like to play him jungle, but since the nerf to Fearless damage way back when, I just don't think it's worth it anymore. So I would probably stick with this. But Fearless, Power Cleave are going to be your go-tos. You don't need to level Stance Switch unless you feel that it's going to be necessary. It does give you 10 damage, 10 defense per level, which is actually pretty significant, but for the most part, you're not going to need it. As you level, the healing is going to become next to impossible to deal with. So at level 9, I'm usually looking like this. Power Cleave Fearless, Power Cleave Wait, Power Cleave Ult, Power Cleave, no, I'm sorry, that would have been Fearless at level 6, Power Cleave at level 7, and then Fearless at 8. Oh, and yeah, Fearless, sorry, I messed up. Fearless at 8, finish Power Cleave at 9. So it should, at level 10, look like this. I didn't mean to take the Stance Switch, that was a mistake. I fat-fingered on the level up. I generally am not going to take a level in my stance switch until after I've completed both of these abilities, and then it's kind of up to you. The damage on this level is by 75 per, which can be significant, but how I see it is that sometimes, and a lot of times, I'm using this move not for damage, but to either chase someone and hope that I hit them, or to run away. If I'm using it to run away, I'm only really getting the cooldown reduction out of the level ups, versus on stance switch, which I'm getting cooldown, I'm getting damage, which helps the ult damage as well, and I'm getting defense. So for the most part, you're generally going to see me level up stance switch. Get this done, unless I'm so far ahead that I know I can continuously gank and hit that mid laner with this, you know, pretty hefty 450 damage. Build-wise, starting off, Warrior's Blessing is going to be your best friend. 40 health and mana regen on a hit per 10 seconds. It's beautiful for Tyr because he needs mana so badly. Anything that's going to give him mana is generally going to be very, very effective. After that, Warrior Tabby can be pretty strong, given the fact that, well, he doesn't really do a lot of auto-attacking, but don't underestimate Reinforced Greaves. His scaling is okay, but a lot of times he's the kind of the center of attention, which means you're drawing a lot of damage. Personally, I love Reinforced Greaves, and you shouldn't ever think that this is a bad idea. If you're a solo laner, do not pick up Teleria Boots. It's just not a good idea. So it's between you and your solo laner. If you're very far ahead, Warrior Tabby can be good. If you're about even, I would personally go Reinforced Greaves as your second item. After that, of course, paying attention to what you're fighting. Most of the time, it's going to be Stone of Gaia. It's health, it's regen, it makes you basically invincible, and it makes it very, very hard for you to be ganked at any point in the game. After that, I would start leaning towards more cooldown reduction, or you can go directly into Hide of the Urchin to make yourself more tanky, get that shield online, which makes it very effective. Even something like this makes you very, very strong. You're getting a lot of both defenses. Stone of Gaia is giving you health, getting a little bit more health in Hide of the Urchin, and you should be a little bit wary. Health is good because of the Stone of Gaia passives, but you're also only bringing up an X amount of health. You know, Tyr's going to heal himself for 105 times 3. So a bigger health pool means you have to apply this more times to keep yourself at full. So it's better usually to go into just mostly defense. You're not going to want to pick up any more health in this build unless you desperately, and I mean desperately, need to pick up a Wingblade for, well, if they have a lot of slows. Things like Nemesis, this works very, very well against. Otherwise, you're just looking for either more cooldown reduction, obviously Thorns, you know, and Hide of the Nemean Lion. These things are very important to stop the enemies from being able to kill you. If you feel you need flat magic defense, despite the fact that there is health on it, Pestilence is usually the way to go because shutting down enemy healing is, for the most part, going to be your go-to. You could also go Bulwark of Hope, which is decent, but you already do have some shielding. Don't forget about Genji's Guard, one of his best items. At this point, you're looking at 20% CDR plus 10 from the blue buff, putting you at 30, a little below cap, but it's still enough to repeatedly apply the damage and make sure that you can get into the thick of things. And you will be taking magical damage, so make sure that you're being the aggressive one, using Blink or your ult to initiate and using everything as fast as possible before that magic damage comes in. That way, once you get hit, your cooldowns go down across the board in both stances, and then you just start tearing through them. Super, super easy. As for relics, a lot of times you can start with Blink, but this is going to be, for the most part, his go-to. You're going to want this by level 12. The only time you're not going to want to pick this up generally is against Odin because you're going to need Phantom in some form, but without Blink, Tyr's initiates are pretty bad. So I would recommend Blink, and if their Hunter is going off, you're going to need Thorns. I mean, this is just the most powerful relic, but remember, Ankh exists. And if you're fighting a Tyr, Ankh exists. If at any point an ability heals anybody on the enemy team after they've been Ankh'd, they're going to take 20% more damage. Right now, this is Tyr's Bane. If this gets activated, that means he can't use his Blue Fearless until the end of the Ankh. If he does, the 20% extra damage usually means he's going to go down. If you are applied with the Ankh, I recommend resetting as fast as possible. Don't switch out of red stance. Make sure you keep these protections online. These 50 protections you'll notice on the left side is bringing me up to 263 and 234. Dropping that puts me at a, well, I mean, not the most dangerous state, but going up against things like Agni or Nox with Spear of the Magus. If there's a Void Stone, if they have Executioner, they could wind up tearing through you pretty quickly. So make sure you're paying attention to what stance you're in. For the most part, you don't want to ult offensively, you know, unless you're in red stance, and you don't want to ult defensively unless you're in defensive stance, because by the time that they're trying to kill you, well, you can use this time with 50 extra protections. It's not a long startup, but it is a startup. For any kind of switching up of the build, just a few other items you should keep an eye on. And Chile is wonderful for him because it has cooldown reduction, and since you're always in the mix of things, that silence as they hit you will perfectly set up your ability to fearless them and kind of ruin their escapes. Characters like Nox, Thoth, Agni all get kind of jammed up by this item pretty hard because they're, you know, once they silence themselves, you have the ability to get in. Now, without the Hand of the Gods, or I guess Fist of the God stun, there's no real training wheels anymore outside of Mantle of Discord, which is also buildable. This could be built in the endgame if you're getting blown up. I would recommend immediately getting rid of Stone of Gaia. Remember, as a character that heals and heals heavily, Stone of Gaia is initially targeted by any anti-heal as well as your heal. It could make you a target in specific for counter building, especially if you have another healer on your team. Someone like a Ra, Chang'e, RTO. I mean, these characters bring more attention to the healing probabilities. So when you have something like that, taking the Stone of Gaia out in the end game for something like Mantle of Discord's, cooldown reduction or whatever else that you might need, the extra protections, the fact that you can get out of jail free at 30%. A lot of people like to just save their ultimate until they're at 30%. When they get hit, they stun, they jump out, staying in defensive stance for as long as possible. The character can do a lot of damage as well. If you decide that you need a little bit of damage, obviously the go-to should always be Brawler's Beat Stick. For the most part, you need to make sure you're shutting down enemy healing as well as tier. Since you don't have a ton of CC outside of Red Fearless, the only thing you can really do is apply debuffs to the enemy. And this really isn't going to give you a good chance to auto-attack people. It's just not that kind of character. He's a bit too slow. So going directly into Brawler's Beat Stick if they have a healer is a good way to go. Otherwise, you're not getting too much. I mean, you could go into Hydras, but again, it's not giving you a lot. Other damage items, Masamune is perfect, gives you, 50 power, 10 movement speed, a little bit of health, and of course those extra protections when you're around someone, which could mitigate the loss from, Mantle of Discord or Spirit Robe or even Stone of Gaia. From the jungle, Heartseeker, amazing. Again, I don't like jungle builds. I don't recommend you being a jungler, but starting Assassins, right? I'll go through it just in case. Starting Assassins is okay. Into Warrior Tabby. Into... where's the Heartseeker? First two items are almost always going to look like this in Jungler. It applies so much damage. After that, cooldown reduction is important. I would recommend Hydra's Lament, into Jotun's Wrath, into... actually, maybe not even Brawlers. Probably Crusher. And even then, you could sacrifice a little bit of damage by going into an early Gladiator Shield as well to keep yourself in the mix, because you still are a tank. You still have some hybrid tendencies. So this is going to give you a pretty significant amount of damage and enough sustainability between your protection stance and your Gladiator Shield to ensure that you can keep yourself going in team fights. Then Hydras, you can avoid this at this point since you're going into mainly abilities by doing this, which is giving you now 30% CDR between these two items. And then of course, Crusher giving you a bit of attack speed in case you go for towers. Physical penetration is always nice, getting a little bit more here, a little bit more here, and you'll have your Assassin's Blessing. So at that point, you're sitting on a decent amount, and then of course, finishing up with a Brawler's Beat Stick. For the most part, you won't really need Titan's Bane because you're not looking at tanks. You are specifically, as a tier jungle, looking to pick off their either ADC or their mage immediately. Tier is an easy god to play. He requires very little thought. For the most part, the biggest decision you'll have to make is when to stance switch. And a small tip that I personally love, when you're leaving the base, leave in blue stance. This is just a better dash. It gives you more distance, it's a little bit faster, and then stance switch as you're running to lane. If you have blue buff, you can use your Red Fearless. It'll be back up before you get there. You want to make sure you're getting that mana back. Same thing if you already have Stone of Gaia. By this point, when you get to the lane, you'll be in red stance to ensure that you can clear or fight. You never want to really initiate in a 1v1 or really at all in blue stance unless your goal is to bait out the enemy abilities. Otherwise, initiating in red stance is great. So when you're leaving the base, even if you have to stance switch, boom. Halfway down, you'll stance switch back. 15 seconds later, no problem. That's tier. He's simple. Again, he's an easy god to play. I recommend messing around a little bit with his fearless combos. Look at that. That late delay, it's just so strong. And again, that bounce is going to make sure your teammates can get them for longer. Doop, doop. Turning around during the fearless, extra damage. He's a combo heavy character. Personally, I don't like tier. I used to like Tyr when he had more damage and less healing, because I find defense for the most part to be kind of boring. He used to be able to just straight combo people out if they didn't have beads, and it was interesting to watch, and more importantly, it was interesting to commentate. Nowadays, I feel that Tyr is a form of frustration. If you like to be frustrating and you're fighting bad opponents, Tyr is generally the way to go, as they don't know how to punish him in the endgame. Goodbye.